Here's 20.
Your change is $7.50.
Thanks.
We must finalize this shipment schedule today. The projections depend on it.
Page 3 still shows a discrepancy in logistics.
We can accelerate the plan if we implement it immediately. The efficiency here is good, but I'm concerned about the raw material storage. We need to address that runoff immediately. Yes, let's make a note of it.
We need to finalize this shipment by the end of the day, or we risk losing the contract entirely. We must prioritize this immediately.
The morning light stretched across the valley, pale and cold, carrying the scent of mist and damp earth. Lytudiep stood at the edge of the garden, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, watching her breath turn to silver in the air. Behind her, the faint barking of Hockey echoed from the small shed near the kitchen. "Good morning, my little one," she murmured, her voice soft as the wind. "I'll get your food ready soon." The dog wagged its tail weakly, shivering slightly, its eyes bright with quiet trust. The farm was still half asleep. The wooden fences glistened with frost, the vegetable beds were stiff with cold, and the faint smoke from her small fire drifted lazily into the pale sky. Diep wrapped her scarf tighter and walked toward the coop, scattering feed for the chickens. The sound of their clucking broke the stillness, reminding her that life, however small, continued to move forward even in the biting winter. She smiled faintly, though her hands were red and numb from the cold. After feeding Hockey, she squatted by the garden, running her fingers through the frozen soil. The seeds she had planted with James a few weeks ago were still dormant, waiting for warmth that hadn't yet come. "You'll wake up soon," she whispered, as if talking to a sleeping child. The quietness of the place gave her both peace and loneliness, a strange balance she had grown used to since coming to live here. Later in the day, she changed into her work clothes and headed toward the small wood shop at the back of the property. The scent of pine and sawdust filled the air, familiar and grounding. She had been working there to earn extra money, cutting, sanding, shaping wood into planks for local orders. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Her palms were rough, her shoulders sore, but there was pride in the ache. Every piece of wood she finished was a step toward independence, a quiet defiance against the pity she so often saw in people's eyes. That afternoon, she was called to the main office of the company, James's company. Inside, the atmosphere was buzzing. The chairman, Mr. Siu, was meeting with new partners from Thailand. The conference table gleamed under the warm light, papers and contracts neatly arranged. "Miss Diep," one of the assistants whispered as she entered. "They're finalizing a deal for the timber exports." She nodded quietly, taking a seat at the back, her curiosity piqued. The Thai representative was polite, his tone measured but impressed. "Your wood quality is excellent," he said, running his hand over one of the samples. "The machinery here is advanced, very consistent. We can easily agree to a long-term contract." Mr. Siu smiled, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "That is good news," he replied. "We can supply 30 to 40 containers per month, and if you need more, we'll find a way." The negotiations went on smoothly. Mr. Tuan, the manager, provided figures and assurances about production capacity. When the contract was finally signed, applause filled the room. It was more than just business. It was a promise of stability, of growth, of a future that had once seemed so uncertain. Diep watched quietly from the corner, her heart swelling with pride for the people she worked alongside. For a brief moment, she felt she was part of something much bigger than herself. That evening, as the workers left and the factory quieted down, James appeared. He was dressed simply, a soft sweater over a collared shirt, but there was always something composed, almost regal, about the way he carried himself. He walked up to her with that familiar, gentle smile. "You're still here?" he asked. "You should be resting." "I just finished cleaning the tools," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It helps me think." He looked at her hands, cracked and raw from work, and frowned. "Your hands are freezing," he said softly. "You need better gloves and a warmer coat." She laughed, embarrassed. "I'll buy them when I have enough money." James shook his head. "You shouldn't wait." The next thing she knew, he had taken her to town. The streets were busy with holiday lights, and the small shops were glowing with warmth. "Let's get you some proper clothes," he said, ignoring her protests. At first, she resisted. "James, I can't let you do this. I can manage." But he only smiled, guiding her gently toward a store. "You've worked hard enough. Consider it an early gift." Inside, he picked out a wool coat, a soft scarf, and a pair of sturdy shoes. She tried them on hesitantly, standing before the mirror. For the first time in a long while, she saw herself differently, not as the girl struggling to survive, but as a woman who could belong anywhere. Her eyes glistened, and she quickly looked away. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Of course you do," James said. "You deserve much more." They left the store and stopped by a small cafe nearby. The golden light from the windows spilled across their faces as they sat down. The air smelled of coffee and sweet milk. "You must be tired," James said, handing her a cup of tea. "I know how much work you've been doing." She smiled faintly. "It's not so bad. I like keeping busy. It stops me from thinking too much." Before he could reply, a voice interrupted. A sharp, cold voice that cut through the warmth. "Well, if it isn't Mr. James himself," said a woman standing by their table. She was elegantly dressed, her perfume strong enough to fill the air. "And who's this?" James turned, polite but cautious. "An old friend," he said. The woman's eyes flicked over Diep with disdain. "Friend? Really? You must have changed your taste." Her smile was cruel. "She looks like she just walked out of a village field." "How sweet of you to take pity on her." Diep froze. The words struck like needles. James's jaw tightened. "That's enough," he said quietly. But the woman wasn't finished. "Come on, James. You could be with anyone. Why waste your time?" She laughed softly, turning to Diep. "He's kind, isn't he? Always helping the poor. But don't mistake kindness for love, dear. He's not in your world." Diep's throat burned. She wanted to reply, to tell the woman to stop, but her voice betrayed her. James stood abruptly, his tone like steel. "You should leave." The woman smirked. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." And with that, she walked away, heels clicking sharply on the floor. The silence that followed was heavy. Diep stared into her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "She's right," she said finally, her voice low. "You shouldn't have to defend me. People will laugh at you." James looked at her, his eyes full of quiet pain. "I don't care what people say," he said firmly. "I care about you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why? Because you pity me?" He leaned forward, his voice gentle but steady. "No, because I see you. I see your strength, your kindness, your heart. I admire you, Diep. Not out of pity, out of respect." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. The words warmed her heart, but also frightened her. Love was a dangerous thing for someone like her, a woman who had already lost too much. They finished their drinks in silence. When they stepped outside, snow had begun to fall, light and soft, covering the world in white. James handed her the scarf he'd bought. "Promise me you'll wear this," he said. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for everything." Later that night, back at the farm, Diep sat beside the small fire with Hockey curled at her feet. The dog's quiet breathing was the only sound in the room. She reached down to stroke its fur, her eyes distant. "What do you think, Hockey?" she murmured. "Does he really mean it? Or does he just feel sorry for me?" Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the garden she had worked so hard to build. Somewhere beyond the frost and silence, the seeds beneath the soil waited patiently for spring, just as she waited, uncertain yet hopeful, for the warmth of something real to find her again. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, its light spilling like gold over the farm. Lytudiep woke early, her breath visible in the cold air. The scarf James had given her still hung neatly on the chair beside her bed. She stared at it for a long moment before finally wrapping it around her neck. It smelled faintly of warmth and something else she couldn't name. Comfort, maybe, or safety. Outside, Hockey was already awake, wagging his tail, waiting for her. "All right, I'm coming," she said with a faint smile. The small dog barked once, as if reminding her that some things in life were still simple and good. She spent the early hours tending to the garden, breaking the ice on the water trough, and checking the plants under their straw covers. The cold bit at her fingers, but she didn't mind. Work helped her forget. Yet, as she looked toward the gate, her heart gave a small, traitorous flutter, as if expecting James to appear. But he didn't. Not today. Instead, she went to the woodshop, where the smell of fresh timber filled the air. The machines hummed steadily, and her co-workers greeted her warmly. She smiled back, but her thoughts drifted elsewhere. The memory of the woman at the cafe still lingered like a thorn. "Don't mistake kindness for love." The words played over and over in her mind until they became almost a rhythm to her work. She wanted to believe James's words, wanted to trust what she saw in his eyes. But doubt has a way of growing quietly, like weeds between stones. Around noon, she received a message from Mr. Tuan, the factory manager, asking her to bring some documents to the main office. When she arrived, she found the room busy with new plans. The Thai partners had increased their order, and there was talk of expanding production. James stood near the window, his back to her, speaking to Mr. Siu in a low, focused tone. "If we can keep up this pace," he said, "we'll secure the contract through next year." He turned when he saw her, and his face softened. "Diep," he greeted, "you're just in time." She handed him the folder silently. For a moment, their eyes met, and the rest of the room faded. But then she looked away quickly, pretending to adjust her coat. "Thank you," he said. "Stay a bit. We'll have lunch after the meeting." She hesitated, then nodded. While the discussion continued, she sat quietly in a corner, observing. James was different here, confident, commanding, every word measured and respected. It reminded her of how far apart their worlds really were. When the meeting ended, he walked over, smiling. "You look like you're thinking too much again," he teased. "Maybe," she said softly. "You belong here, in this world. I just don't want to be a burden." He frowned. "You're not a burden, Diep." "But people talk," she murmured. "That woman the other day, she wasn't wrong. You could be with anyone, someone who understands your world." He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I don't need someone to understand my world. I need someone to remind me why it's worth living in." Her heart stuttered. She didn't know how to reply, so she just lowered her gaze and whispered, "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" he asked, stepping closer. "Because they scare you?" She met his eyes then, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to shift. But before either could speak again, Mr. Tuan entered, breaking the silence. "Sir," he said quickly, "the shipment for Thailand is ready, but we have an issue. The supplier from Da Nang delayed half of the material." James sighed, the tenderness in his eyes replaced instantly by the sharp focus of a businessman. "All right, let's fix it," he said. "Diep, can you handle the quality check while we sort the logistics?" She nodded, grateful for the distraction. The rest of the afternoon passed in work, inspecting planks, recording notes, ensuring each shipment met the new standards. By evening, her body ached, but her mind was calmer. She liked the precision of it, the way each piece of wood had to fit perfectly before it was sent off. Maybe people were the same, she thought, needing the right shape, the right place, before they could truly belong. When she returned home, the sky was streaked with red and purple. She fed Hockey, lit the stove, and made a simple dinner of rice and vegetables. The scarf still hung around her neck, its warmth a quiet reminder of him. Just as she sat down, her phone buzzed. It was James. "Are you home?" "Yes." "Have you eaten?" She smiled faintly. "Just now." "Good. Tomorrow I'll visit. There's something I want to show you." "All right, but you don't have to." "I want to." She put the phone down, her fingers trembling slightly. What could he possibly want to show her? The thought stayed with her all night. The next morning, James arrived just as the sun rose. He was carrying a small package wrapped neatly in brown paper. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "Ready for a surprise?" She blinked at him, suspicious. "What are you planning now?" "Nothing dangerous," he laughed. "Come with me." They walked down the path toward the lower field, where the frost still glittered like glass. He stopped by a small patch of soil near the stream. "This," he said, pointing, "is for you." She frowned. "What is it?" "A greenhouse," he said proudly. "Or it will be once we build it. I already ordered the materials. You'll be able to grow vegetables all year, even through winter." She stared at him, stunned. "You did this for me?" He shrugged lightly. "You've been talking about expanding your garden. I just thought, why not help?" Her chest tightened. "James, you shouldn't spend your money on me." He smiled softly. "It's not about money, Diep. It's about giving you something that lasts. You've given this place life. It's only fair it gives something back." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat ached and her eyes stung with unshed tears. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then don't say anything," he replied. "Just promise me you'll let yourself be happy." That night, after he left, she sat by the half-built frame of the greenhouse, the stars shimmering above. Hockey lay beside her, his head on her lap. The world felt bigger somehow, and yet smaller, like everything she needed was right there. She thought about his words, about the quiet certainty in his voice when he said he cared. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't pity after all. But even as warmth spread through her chest, doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. People didn't change so easily, and the world rarely forgave a woman for loving beyond her station. Still, when she looked up at the night sky, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this time, I'll believe." The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine and promise. And for the first time in a long while, Lytudiep felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. The first sign of trouble came quietly, like the whisper of a storm before rain. For weeks, Lytudiep had lived in the soft rhythm of the farm. Mornings with Hockey, afternoons at the workshop, evenings when James visited and the two of them sat together watching the sunset melt into gold. It was a fragile happiness, one she held carefully, afraid that even breathing too deeply might shatter it. But peace never lasted long in her world. It began one afternoon when she went into town to deliver a shipment of woodwork. The streets were busy with laughter and chatter, but as she passed the small cafe by the square, voices rose behind her. "That's her," a woman whispered loudly. "The one living with the CEO." Another chuckled. "No wonder she got that job." Men always have their reasons. Diep froze. The laughter followed her like smoke. She didn't turn around, didn't say a word. She just kept walking, her heart pounding against her ribs. The weight of their voices clung to her long after they faded. By the time she returned to the farm, her hands were shaking. She didn't tell James that night. He was tired from a meeting, and when he smiled at her across the dinner table, she couldn't bring herself to spoil the calm. But gossip spreads like wildfire. Within days, the whispers reached the company. Some of the workers looked at her differently, not with cruelty, but with that same quiet judgment that cut even deeper. One morning, Mr. Tuan pulled her aside. "Diep," he said carefully, "you know people talk. They think you're getting special treatment." Her face burned. "I didn't ask for anything." "I know," he said gently, "but it's how things look. You should keep some distance from Mr. James, for now." That night, when James came to visit, she met him at the gate, her expression cold but trembling. "We can't keep meeting like this," she said. He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "People are talking," she said, her voice cracking. "They think I'm here because of you, not because I worked for it." He stepped closer, confusion darkening his eyes. "Since when do you care what they think?" "Since it hurts," she whispered. "Since it makes me feel small again." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Diep, don't let them poison what we've built." She looked at him, tears threatening. "You don't understand. You never had to prove your worth. I did, every day." His silence was heavy. "So what do you want me to do?" "Leave me alone," she said quietly, "at least for a while." For a long time, he said nothing. Then he nodded, the pain in his eyes almost unbearable. "If that's what you need," he murmured, and he walked away without another word. The days that followed were gray and hollow. Without him, the farm felt colder. The garden seemed slower to grow, and even Hockey grew restless, whining at the sound of approaching footsteps that never came. Diep buried herself in work, trying to lose the ache beneath routine. But at night, when the wind howled through the fields, she couldn't help but think of him, the way he used to laugh, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. Meanwhile, James threw himself into his company. The Thai contract was expanding, and new investors were arriving. On the surface, everything looked perfect, but every success felt empty. His mind was always half somewhere else, in the quiet hills where a girl with tired hands and brave eyes once smiled at him under the winter sun. One evening, as he left a business dinner, he overheard two executives talking. "It's a shame," one said. "A man like James, wasting time on a farm girl. What a scandal." Something in him broke. That night, he got in his car and drove, past the city lights, past the endless stretch of highway, until the stars appeared again. He didn't stop until he saw the faint outline of her house in the distance. The gate creaked softly as he pushed it open. Diep was sitting by the fire, mending a torn blanket. When she looked up and saw him, her breath caught. "James," she whispered. "Why?" "I couldn't stay away," he said simply. "Not when I know you're hurting." Her voice trembled. "I told you to leave me be." "I tried," he said, "but you can't fight alone forever." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Do you think I care what they say? Let them talk. They'll grow bored eventually. If I walk away from you, that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand. I don't want to be your weakness." "You're not my weakness," he said. "You're my strength." For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind of silence that carried every word they couldn't say. Then, faintly, she whispered, "They'll never accept me." "Then I'll make them," he said. "Not because of who I am, but because of who you are." She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You can't fight the whole world, James." He smiled sadly. "Maybe not, but I can stand beside you while you fight it." That broke something inside her, the wall she had built, brick by brick, to keep her heart safe. She stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling as they reached for his. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I know," he said softly, "but I did." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind had stilled, and the moonlight poured through the window, bathing them in silver. It was the first time in days she had allowed herself to breathe. Later that week, James did something no one expected. At the company's annual meeting, in front of his board, the staff, and even the foreign partners, he stood and spoke plainly. "I owe our success to the people who've worked tirelessly behind the scenes," he said. "One of them is lytudiep, a woman whose integrity and determination inspire me every day." Gasps filled the room. He continued, unshaken. "I will no longer allow gossip or class to divide this company. Respect is not earned by bloodlines or money. It's earned by character." The room fell silent. Mr. Siu nodded approvingly. Mr. Tuan smiled faintly. For the first time, no one dared whisper. That evening, James returned to the farm. Diep was waiting at the gate, her eyes red from tears. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied, "not to prove anything, but to end the noise." She stared at him, her voice breaking. "You risked your reputation." He smiled gently. "Reputation can be rebuilt, but some people you only find once." Her heart swelled, fragile but full. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You really mean that?" He nodded. "I've never meant anything more." The wind stirred softly through the fields. She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. Not out of fear this time, but faith. The warmth of his fingers spread through her, chasing away months of cold and doubt. "I don't know what the future will be," she whispered. "Then we'll build it," he said. Together they stood under the stars, the faint glow of the farm lights flickering behind them. Pocky barked once, as if sealing the promise. The world outside might never understand, might never approve, but in that quiet moment, none of it mattered. Because love, the kind born not from wealth or pity, but from two hearts that refused to give up, had already found its home. And this time, neither of